we hold back a lot of growth for the business, like a lot of growth strategically, and making sure that we have the foundational elements necessary to support that level of growth. I'm by no means excited by growth for the sake of growth and top line revenue and all the things that a lot of founders today are obsessed with. I'm very, very focused on a few KPIs that I think most founders are not, which is profitability, positive cash flow, sustainable growth. I'll put a max on what we can do in a year. Be like, we're not going over this number.
This has got to be one of the best conversations I've ever had with a founder. Maurice from Still Here is world class. You may not have heard of him yet, but you will. He's already taken New York by storm, becoming one of the hottest denim brands, and now he's moving over to LA and expanding. Maurice has crossed into the 8 figures in his business and growing really rapidly. We talk about in this episode what it really means to bootstrap. Maurice has never taken a penny from outside. He started with very modest sum of money, became the #1 seller in Barneys right before they went bankrupt, and never saw a penny from him. We go into every single moment, key moment in his business where he had to make decisions where he kind of didn't know what to do next. We talk about how to deal with early employees, the differences between retail, wholesale, e-com, and how they all interplay together. You've got to watch this one. You're going to learn a ton. Building a business is like walking through quicksand and chewing broken glass, and sometimes we only celebrate the highlight reels. But in this episode with Maurice, we dig deep into what really mattered in those key moments in his business. I think you're going to love it. Ladies and gentlemen, Maurice, Still Here. Maurice, it's great to have you. Still Here NYC. You guys are on fire right now, man. Tell us a little bit about the business, where you're at, how you got there. Just a few quick highlights before we dive into some of the nitty-gritty of what it's like to run it.
Yeah, so Still Here is probably about, I'd say, 5 or 6 years old. We've been growing fairly quickly. So we're now an 8-figure business and building infrastructure for the next tier of scale. So we've doubled our revenue the last 3 years, which is exciting. We now operate 3 stores in New York, 1 store in LA opening this year, which is another exciting venture. We have a wholesale business where we sell, I'd say, probably 180 retailers, over 200 doors, both domestically and internationally. And the team is growing. So we're about, I'd say, 20 on the corporate side, closer to 40 with retail employees.
Wow. And you run it with your wife, right? As your co-founder?
Yeah. She's my partner in life.
Do you guys have any rules around, like, no talking shop after 6 p.m. or 7 or 8 p.m. or whatever?
We try not to, but depending on the situation, sometimes that's difficult. We definitely go offline completely, Friday night to Saturday night. So we're Jewish, so we do Shabbat completely offline. We don't talk about work. We don't check in on work. Almost completely disconnected. Family time.
Did you always take off that one day?
Since we started the business, yeah.
Since you started the business. And was it hard at first? Because, it's not like, Friday comes, we all like to think that you wrap a bow on it and it ends in this neat little package, but it doesn't. Usually, sometimes I imagine there's weekends you go in and you're still drinking through a fire hose.
I think what proved more difficult was going offline when we had retail stores, because obviously, Saturday's the best day at retail, and just being able to completely go offline and have that level of trust that everything's handled was definitely a learning curve. But I think it's just one of those things that it's a muscle that gets stronger as you work it. And so now I'll wake up Saturday morning and completely forget we even have a business. So I think it's learned.
Do you wake up Sunday morning super early, ready to rock?
I'll open my computer Saturday night.
And just hope you don't have a flurry of troubleshooting.
I usually don't. We have a great team. They understand the situation. And so we built systems to support it.
Well, let's talk a bit about those systems and what you built. Like, you started, I think, was it a DC only at the beginning?
When we first started the business, it's actually, it's a funny story. When we first started the business, there wasn't really a business or a brand. My wife, Sonia, who's a very talented creative, she has always been inspired by denim. Her father's actually an Egyptian immigrant that came to America with very little money and bought a pair of jeans and, wore those jeans for 10 years and then gave them to her when she was a teenager. And so that inspired her in terms of like how denim as a fabric can capture people's stories. And so she started collecting vintage denim. And she's also a talented artist. And so just out of the frustration of being, influenced by her parents who were immigrants and wanting her to be a business person or a doctor or a lawyer and just like being a creative. So she started painting stripes on the back of her vintage jean collection and posting it on Instagram. And there was like a natural momentum to that. People thought it was cool and interesting and novel. They've never seen anything like that before. And so the way that the business started was essentially people asking if she can paint stripes on their denim. From there, we were invited to do a trade show, and I helped Sonia set up her booth, and she was painting stripes on another brand's denim, and there was about 100 interested retailers in product that didn't really exist. So the business actually started D2C in a very small way, but the real, I want to say, catalyst was that following the trade show, it was a 3-day show, there was 100 interested retailers, and then there was Barneys that reached out via email asking for line sheets. So we were sort of thrusted into the wholesale world almost immediately, which for me was actually good because I had a wholesale background and experience, and what I didn't have at all was D2C.
Hi, I'm David. I'm the president of Highbeam. But before that, I built a brand called David's Tea from 0 to 200 million in sales, and I took it public on the NASDAQ. Highbeam is a banking and cash management platform for consumer brands. It's the bank I wish I had when I was building David's Tea. We'll turn banking from a cost center for you today into a profit center for you tomorrow. We'll make you better cash back on ad spend. We'll maximize your yield on idle working capital through daily automated sweeps. And we have a host of AI-powered tools to save you a boatload of time. Check us out at highbeam.com and let's talk.
So Barneys wants to buy, but wholesale has horrible cash conversion cycles typically, right? Where the retailers at best, pay you in 60 days, and often you're chasing them for money. And then on the flip side with the suppliers, they're, especially if you're a new business, they're often asking for money up front. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, so that was definitely one of those lessons we had to learn the hard way. We did the first production run of our denim with our savings account money, basically money that we got as gifts from our wedding. Sonia and I got married when we were super young, 22 years old. And we got, these wedding gifts from family, and we put it in a savings account, and it was either Bitcoin or the first production run for Still Here. So time will tell which will be the better investment, but so far it's Bitcoin.
That's right. Yeah, but it depends on the month.
Yeah, exactly. Depends on the day. So we took that money, put it into the first production run, and we ended up delivering that product to Barneys because they were so interested. When we finally came back to them and offered them the product we had, it was that production run. Barneys would take all that product, give us net terms, and we were just so excited to see that the product was selling well. We barely negotiated, terms that would make sense for us from a cash flow perspective. And I'd say probably about 4 weeks later, our buyer reached out, said we were the best-selling denim brand on the floor. So we broke the sell-through record for a denim brand on the floor. And at the time, we were up against like some of the largest denim brands in the world, Frame, Goldie, Redone, which was crazy for us because all we had was 250 pieces, which is what we gave them. And Barneys, about 2 weeks later, would go bankrupt, and we never got paid that money. So,
wow, talk about a what to do next moment. So you're sitting there, you have product market fit, it's a top seller, but you're broke. You just gave them a bunch of product, took your life savings, popped it in, and nobody's paying you. So take us back to that moment. What's the stakes are high right now. Like what are you thinking, and what are your options?
Yeah, so that was a very difficult time because I was still in a place where I didn't really understand this business very much. My previous business was more volume, impulse, lower price point products for major retailers. And so trying to understand the way to work within this specific subset of an industry of upper contemporary luxury price point denim in clothing, which I didn't have experience in either, was a really steep learning curve. Essentially, the decision I had to make was, do we continue down this road of building the wholesale side of the business and figure out a way to make it run, or do we just, essentially in a way call it quits and rethink the business? Because we were small enough to be able to do that. I think at the time it was just my wife and I. We got burned by Barneys. We had no money left. But it was just like I had another business and the stakes weren't super high at all at that time.
Meaning you had nothing to lose.
Exactly. We lost already everything we had to lose. So we were back at square one, and it was sort of like, okay, where do we go from here? But just like understanding that I had this asset, which was this sell-through from Barneys, that we broke the sell-through record on the floor, was invigorating for me. And so coming out of that bankruptcy and getting no money from Barneys, I took that sell-through PDF, that sell-through record, and basically went out cold calling, which was, it's very not standard in this business and industry. But I was cold calling some of the major retailers like Net-a-Porter and Bergdorf Goodman and Saks, and we would go on to break a lot of major retailers and department stores, domestically and internationally, just like cold calling, reaching out. When I was finally able to get them to respond on LinkedIn, it was like, I just want to show you one thing. If I could just show you this one thing, like give me 1 second of your attention, I think you'll be interested in it. And when they would open up that PDF, they'd, see the Barneys header, and they'd show the sell-through record was 85% or whatever it was in a 3-week turn period. And they were like, whoa, there's something here. And I had to explain, like, yeah, we just launched with them. We broke the sell-through record, and then they went bankrupt. And we're looking for the next partner to pick up where this left off. They already took the risk. This is in the bag for you. And so we were able to basically break almost every major retailer that way.
But Maurice, I mean, listening to you, I got so many questions. You're at this inflection point where you've lost your money that you had for this business. I get that you have something small on the side that can give you a few bucks here and there, but you got burnt. Yes, you got the benefit of learning product market fit, but why would you not go and be like, okay, forget these wholesalers. There's so much risk in them actually paying us. Why wouldn't you go right into D2C then and say, hey, maybe I can just go direct?
The way I've always thought about D2C is that at this time, I was very convinced that we couldn't build a brand without funding it in a really big way. And I think that still holds true today. Just to build a D2C side of the business would require so much education for the consumer that I think we saw wholesale at the time as an opportunity to be able to really reach masses in a way we wouldn't be able to on our own on the D2C side. And so, what we're selling was complicated. We were selling 100% cotton jeans, right? At a time when customers were primarily buying stretch denim, right? And we were trying to do it online. And so, nobody will tell you this, but 100% cotton jeans fit differently than stretch denim. So if you think you're a size 26 in 100% cotton, you're probably a size 27 or 28. So good luck telling a woman that online. So really trying to get in front of them and make those sales and make them stick was part of what we were finding was the difficulty with D2C. We were selling a product that people want to try on, that's 100% cotton, that has an education aspect to it, and we're doing it, essentially in a time that was, about to become the hardest time ever to sell someone a product that they're going to wear outside, which would be COVID.
Wow. Okay. So you just threw in a whole other variable. So you decide to go double down on retail. I mean, before we get into the COVID thing, first of all, who's making these jeans for you, and how are you managing the cash conversion cycles, right? Because you got no money at this point.
So we basically were able to get the attention of all these retailers and get all these orders, right? And so we basically would consolidate all these orders, and we flew out to LA. We found the factory, just like literally knocking on doors. We heard that you can make denim in LA. We found the factory. It was this small mom and pop facility, and they were like, yeah, we'll do it for you. We'll do a small production run for you. And they believed in us. We spent 18 months in R&D with them until we made our first fit in one wash. And that would be the product that we would launch with all these retailers. And so I think what I had to do, because I had no money, was I learned the hard way. I had to negotiate terms with retailers. So what I was able to do was get 50% deposits from these retailers to really help fund the business. So we got, a bunch of retailer orders. We would end up breaking Net-a-Porter, Farfetch, Browns, Revolve, Shopbop, Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf Goodman, Saks Fifth Avenue, Fred Siegel, Harvey Nichols, Selfridges, Holt Renfrew. Every major retailer you can sell, we broke on our own, cold calling, bringing, garment bags to their offices, traveling, and just like getting them to believe in us and take a risk. And so we got all those orders. We consolidated that higher volume order to this factory that believed in us, placed the order, went into production using those deposits, and then we would get all that product, and it was time to start fulfilling, and the retailers would reach out to us saying basically their DCs are closing because of COVID. And so now we're stuck with all this product and we didn't know what to do. And D2C would become a byproduct of that.
Wow. Okay. So first you get hit with this major problem of Barneys. You don't get paid. Money's gone. Then you use that sell through to convince and knock on a whole lot of doors and basically work the phones and outbound to get all of these major, like the best retailers in the country for fashion to carry your product. Then you convince them. They normally, I mean, none of these retailers would they don't give anybody 50% deposit on product. Like it's usually net 60, if not more, right? With most of them that they're asking for.
Yeah, I think the specific area we were playing in was starting to become a division I think that they were excited by and seeing a lot of value in how you can revisit advanced denim and upper contemporary denim. And so I think that there was this excitement about being able to help bring the next wave of young brands in this space to market. So that was something that they were actually surprisingly open to. A bunch of them we had to push and get flexible on. Some of them refused to give us deposits, and we would have to. I asked for one retailer to give us a 65% deposit to cover the cost of two retailers' orders. So we had to get creative, but most of them were actually pretty willing after seeing the sell through and after understanding, meeting us and understanding what we were trying to do in the marketplace. Surprisingly, a lot of them believed in us in a way that allowed us to be able to ask for what we needed at the time.
I definitely want to get into the COVID inflection point because it's so massive, but what do you think most or many people in that situation would get wrong?
I think most people would probably throw in the towel in a way.
Right.
And realize that they didn't have the money to start a brand right now and that they either had to figure out funding immediately or they had to, I guess, pack things up, right? And for us, or for me, it's always been more of like, prove to me that there's viability for this product in the market, and I will do anything I can to make sure that it's successful.
But why didn't you go get funding? I mean, you're right. Most people would be like, okay, this works. I'm going to go take those same Barneys sell-throughs and show it to a bunch of investors.
Yeah, I still ask myself this question, and we're far beyond the point of needing it, luckily. I think for me, it was a couple things. One was just like the sheer ignorance of just not wanting to get involved in putting together a pitch deck and having to go out and convince people that we're great. I had like a really high conviction that this was going to be a successful business. And I said, I wanted to challenge myself to do it on my own. And I think this is probably one of the biggest decisions I had to make in the business was like, do we bootstrap this? Or do we, raise funds and figure out a way to make it so that we can fund building a brand in a way that makes sense? And I, of course, took the harder route of saying, I'm actually going to do it completely on my own with no experience. And that to me was a challenge that I was excited about. And I think it's one of these things that I like to do is like hack for the type of person that you are. And so it's like, I'm not going to go to the gym if I have to make, this crazy effort to be at the gym. But if I hack for the type of person that I am, it becomes easier. So I know I'm the type of person that I'm a workaholic and I'm always at the office and I love to work. So if the gym is at the office, I'll go to the gym, right? And it's the same thing with if there's a competitor that I have to beat, I will beat them. And so I have to consistently be moving the benchmark of like who our competitor is this year. And so in that way, building the business was one of those challenges that I saw as like this thing I had to do myself.
Well, it's you hear the word bootstrapping a lot, but you actually have to define bootstrapping, right? Like I think in some people's minds, it's like, oh, I'll just bootstrap it. It means I'll pay for it myself. Well, no, bootstrapping means figuring out how to fund a business when there is no funding. So in this situation, I mean, you had your customers, your retailers prepay for product, and then your supplier, I imagine you probably negotiated some flexibility there as well, right?
You're right about the bootstrapping thing. It's very much a question of how do you cash flow the business more than how do you bootstrap a business? Because if you're bootstrapping a business but consistently needing to inject it with your own cash, then there's not really a viable foundation there, right? So for us, it was very much about cash flowing the business. And so if we can get those deposits from retailers, we can cash flow to the point of, getting paid for the balance of what was due from them. And if we can take that money, we can roll that into the next potential opportunity to make money. And I think the hardest part early on was building a brand and thinking that every dollar we put into the business had to have a ROI, which is like completely against the idea of brand building. It's like they come in conflict with each other constantly, because when you're building a brand, you have to look at a lot of the expenses as sunken cost. And it's all like this idea of like, we're in building mode, there's going to be a customer for it. And there's, they'll see the value there or whatever it might be. So for us, very early on, thinking from an ROI perspective, I think set us up to be able to build a foundation and a business where we are, completely cash flowed right now. We have zero debt, right? Completely independent and have freedom to do whatever we want, whenever we want. We don't have to answer to investors or anyone really. And we're profitable, very profitable annually. And so I think like, because we had to think like this so early on, it gave us the foundation to be, where we are today.
There's two areas I'd love to go into, but one I'm dying to ask you is, you had this supplier early on that was small that helped you out. Now you're a much bigger business. I imagine you hit a point with them where they couldn't keep up. How did you handle that? I mean, here there's these people that you've built a special relationship with, but fundamentally can't take you to the next level.
Yeah, this is a theme for us that's been happening over the last few years, just as we've been experiencing so much growth, so much organic growth and traction, that it's like, it's a really hard thing to deal with as a founder, especially like when you're someone that cares about people and relationships more than you care about money and business. This is like the more difficult part of the business for me. Finding people that dedicate so much and are so loyal and help you build, right?
Right.
And then getting to the point where those people are no longer valuable to the business, not to you as a person, but to the business, because you've outgrown them. The reconciliation of that, I think, is one of the more difficult things you have to deal with as you're building a business. We dealt with that on the production side, and that was a very honest conversation we had to have. And in a way, it's mutual, right? You always want to, I think, have that amicable understanding where it's like, you helped us get here, but you can't help us get there. And a lot of times when there's pushback, I love to give those individuals or businesses an opportunity to prove themselves, that they can scale with us. For example, like our 3PL is a great example. Like we work with a 3PL that's literally an Amazon warehouse. Like the only customers they work with ship FBA to Amazon, and we're the only brand that they work with. And it's funny because they've just been so great to work with because they're so flexible and open to working with us. And we reached a point in the business where our D2C business started to grow, and we're fulfilling, hundreds of orders a day, and we're selling 180 retailers. And it's just like, they were not where we needed them to be. They were like 4 people. They were bootstrapping. They had a truck that they would park outside of their warehouse when they didn't have enough space. They would leave things in the truck overnight. It was just like not the level that we needed. And so we told them like, hey, we're at the level where we need an ERP system, and we need a WMS system, and we need, a dedicated account manager, and we need people on the floor that are picking and packing for us all day. And so we're going to move in that direction, and we'd love to give you a chance to do that. If you guys are interested in scaling with us. If you don't think you can do that, that's great, because we have a bunch of options on the table for other businesses we can work with. And we wish you the best of luck. They scaled with us.
That's awesome. Because sometimes they do. Rarely do they scale with you. Like we had a supplier early on at David's Tea where she was doing several of our teas out of her kitchen when we were small. But then as we grew, we ended up keeping her for one SKU. It was actually our pumpkin chai, and she would just make pumpkin chai throughout the summer in her kitchen. And that one SKU was most of her business because we did so much volume. But she helped us early on, so we kept her on. But yeah, she couldn't scale with us. We had to find bigger suppliers. And she didn't, and you're right. I mean, sometimes if you have that conversation, frankly, with them, this supplier, this 3PL you're talking about, they're like, no, we're along for the ride with you. We want to grow with you. But some of them will look at you and be like, no, I'm not going to become a large business.
There's not a very limited number of potential avenues for third parties you can work with as you're growing, right? Definitely in America. But I think that the harder part of this conversation is like, what do you do when the problem is internal? The people that helped you grow from 0 to 1, right? On your team, right? The people that are on your team that helped you get to where you are. And it's like, now you've outgrown that individual and you need people with experience on your team every day. And it's like, now are you going to move around that person in a way that you can continue to help support their career and grow with them? Or did you outgrow that individual? And that's like a really hard decision to have to make, and the hard conversations to have, right? In a way, it's like you have to make a decision that's for the best of the business, but also how do you make a decision that's fair to the person as well, right?
I made a ton of mistakes in that situation when David's tea was scaling. I would basically push the person to come along into inflated roles that they simply weren't ready for. And I think I actually sets them up for failure.
Yeah. We've been there and had to move things around. And yeah, it's definitely one of the harder parts of the business.
But it's a hard pill, right? It's a hard pill to look at someone who has gone to battle with you and been loyal and say to them, look, you're not ready for XYZ role or mandate that you really think you are.
Those are definitely the harder conversations to have in the business. I'd say probably those are the hardest conversations to have in the business, especially when like you're trying to cultivate the type of business that, in company culture we're trying to cultivate, which is we're a family business. It's me and my wife here every day. My kids are in the office sometimes. Like it's very much a family business. And so we see the team that way as well. And like we're super close with everyone. And Sonia and I we're silly and like we're jokesters. And we like to have a very casual relationship, even though the work is serious and we have really high standards. And it's very clear when someone's doing a good job and when they're not, and we have to have those conversations as well. But I think like the reconciliation of having both that family-like culture and also, having to speak to people about them and their career, not necessarily being a long-term benefit to the business, is one of the hardest things to do.
Have you had to let go some people that have really been in the trenches with you?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. And always am.
How do you approach it? So like, I mean, I'm sure there's butterflies in your stomach and you're sleepless night beforehand, but how do you approach that?
This is one of those things that I'm still learning every day and seeing what works and what doesn't. It's like I've had what I thought were great conversations and then got that follow-up email that was just like, whoa, like we completely thought this went different ways. I think that a lot of it is trying to have a very clear thought process about what's working and what's not, and then presenting that to the individual in a way that they can understand without being offended. I initially used to do this thing where I'd be like, oh yeah, we love you so much and you're the best and blah, 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 blah. And here's the problem, right?
Right.
And now I think I'm finding that it works a little bit better when like you just attack it, straight on.
Right.
And tell them like, we're experiencing X, Y, and Z because of, this problem that is your responsibility. And here's how, here's the way it should be. And we love you and we hope, that you can figure this out. And if you can't, then obviously we're going to have a bigger problem here. Instead of like framing it up like, I'm about to tell you something that you might be offended by, right?
Right.
Rather,
because all they hear is the but.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of doing this too, where it's like, you're wonderful, you're fabulous, but you're doing the opposite. You're saying, there are problems. Here's what they are. Here's what you need to fix. And so it's like the and you're wonderful instead of the, you're wonderful, but there's a big problem here.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that the other way of thinking about it is like, you're great and you're wonderful and we love you and whatever, but X, Y, and Z. And so the idea is like that whatever comes after the but sort of turns the first part on its head.
Right. They don't remember
which is not true, right?
Right. Of course.
Whereas it's like, here's the problem we're experiencing and right, you're awesome. And I feel like that in a way gives them a little bit more motivation and like, okay, fine. Like there is a problem. Maybe, this is something that I have to really focus on. And they believe in me in order to be able to do that. Like they want to give me the tools to be able to do that. And my value isn't tied to, that particular mistake. They still see value in me. And here's how I continue to bring value.
Right. I want to go back to something you said about, you guys were it sounds like maniacal about ROI. And often when you're building a brand, there's things you do that don't have an ROI, but a series of those can be quite impactful, right? How do you think about that maybe today?
I think we're now at a point where like we've outgrown that immediate ROI on everything we do, which is like, a load off, which is nice. but still thinking about our campaigns and our marketing from an ROI perspective is, one of the things that continues to make the business successful. So it's like I think the best way to explain this is that it's not the ROI that's changed, it's the return window, right?
Interesting.
So we still need an ROI on the investments we make from a marketing perspective or from a brand perspective. It's just the window for ROI return, right? The actual return on that investment is a lot longer term than it was initially. Because we built the business to cash flow itself, we're less dependent on the ROI being within, 60 days. And now it can be like something we do now can pay off in, a year from now or 2 years from now. And we have we have that runway.
And what's a good example of that? Would it be the stores?
I think initially the stores were the missing puzzle piece for the cash flow, right? Because for us, we were always limited, like in terms of what we can put into digital ads and really see a return on. We were selling a product that was a $300 price point. The customer needs to be wined and dined a little bit more than just advertise to them on Instagram and there's a quick checkout, right? We had a huge return rate online because of the 100% cotton and the learning curve associated with that. So for us, we were just like, how do we make, there's obviously demand, like the retailers want it, right? The customers want it. We were making sales in lockdowns in COVID on our website, right? Organically with basically no digital ads. So we were like, how do we make that sale and make it stick? And for us, the answer was like, if they can just try on the product, right? And they can see themselves in the mirror and they know their size, like done, like great, perfect. And we were like, how do we do that? Well, the wholesale side of things is difficult right now. A lot of retailers are closed. And we were like, let's say we open a store. Right? Obviously, the hardest time to be thinking about opening stores in COVID lockdowns, but the retail store for us was bridging the gap of the customer demand, right, and making the sale stick.
Right.
And what we would learn was that it was actually also the cash flow fix, because having the store opened in New York City downtown, we were making sales we wouldn't make on our website or when we went to market 2 times a year for major retailers, right? It was just like more of that passive customer comes in, likes the product, is excited by it, and checks out.
But I'm going to challenge you on that because the build out costs on stores aren't cheap. I mean, I built 200 doors, I know. So that's not an obvious thing. Like maybe just double click there.
Yeah. So our first lease was a COVID deal. Right. So we were paying essentially, very, very, a very low rent. And we had a 8-month lease, which is like almost doesn't exist. We did our build out within 10 days for $8,000 with a couple pieces of wood and a handyman.
Wow.
No permits. We covered up the walls, the windows. We bought some wood. We picked the stain ourselves. We sat there staining it with the handyman, put it up on the wall, and did like a really cheap build.
So that's why the stores are so great for you guys cash flow wise. You didn't have a big cash outlay at the start. You have very low rent, and they're just cash cows for you.
Yeah, and so that was like the first 2 stores, and then the third store, obviously, we started to think about we can't really do this in the same scrappy way we have in the past. We don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the time. Sonia and I can't be there. We need a design agency, we need an architecture firm, we need to file permits. We can't risk the store being shut down, and everything associated with that.
But now you have a sense of what the volumes are going to be out of these stores.
Yeah, and I think as we're opening our 4th store now in LA, which is our first store outside of New York, and a completely different, city and county and all the headaches that come with that and the management that comes with that from, the other side of the country. We're in a place where it's like, yeah, we sort of have to think about it from a more of like a P&L perspective, like how long until we break even here, like how much are we actually allocating to the build out. So like, yeah, we've grown to deal with the headaches, but initially it was very much like it was cash flow. The retail stores were cash flow.
Let's go back. I mean, we got to go to the key pivotal moment for you. I mean, the show is called What to Do Next. You're sitting there. You have sold, you guys are high-fiving. You've sold every single major fashion house store your product. It's sitting in, it's sitting in their DCs or it's about to go to their DCs. You produced it. And they just call and tell you, sorry, we're shutting the whole thing down. COVID just broke out. Like you got their deposits, but presumably you're on the hook for all this product. What's going through your head? What did you do?
I'd say this is one of the 2 to 3 major decisions we had to make in the business. We realized that if we were going to be dependent on retailers, we were never going to be able to build the brand the way we wanted to. Like I was saying about the retail side of things, we saw that there was obviously a product market fit, right? And so we were like basically thinking, how do we make these sales and make them stick? And so the retail was the unlock for that. And eventually the retailers would come back to us and, take the product or whatever was left of it that we didn't sell through in our own stores.
Is that when you made the decision, I'm going to open my own stores?
Yeah. Yeah. When we realized that we were so dependent on the retailers for the business, I immediately recognized like, wait a second, this is not the type of business I want to build. So that was when I realized I wanted to essentially own the distribution of the business. And so what was hard about this, I think, which brings me to like the second hardest decision we ever had to make, maybe the third after being bootstrapped in the beginning, maybe the fourth after deciding to join full time.
Never a dull moment, huh?
Yeah, right. But the hardest decision to make was that we would open our retail store and then our second retail store on Madison Avenue and really start to build this D2C side of the business. And the retailers would all come back and be like, we actually want the product now, right? We'll take it. We want it now. What can you ship us right now? Of course, we were, naive and like, yeah, take this, take that, and we started shipping them more product and taking more cut orders and producing for them more. And we found ourselves again in the same position where it was like, now we were at the mercy of these retailers, not because they were going to cancel their orders now, but from the brand visibility, right? Whereas on the retail side of the business, in our own stores and on our own website, we can control, the price points and the way the product is styled and the way that it's merchandised and the experience around it, the way that the store looks and the music that's being played and the way that, the product that's near it and the smell and the whole experience of the retail store, which I'm sure is like something you probably spoke about a lot.
It was all about the sensory experience in the theater, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're building this world, right, for the customer to come into, and then it's like closing that sale becomes a lot easier, right? And then it's like you put the product in a retailer or department store that it's like there's all these like different things you can't control, like who's on the floor with you, what's their price point, how is their product being styled, how similar is it, what color is it, are you directly competing against them or somebody else, what floor is it on, how easy is it to get there, right? Is it on the mannequin, is it not, what does your point of sale look like all of these different things. And that's just on the actual retail side, brick and mortar. Like what about online where it's like they have the ability to outbid you on the product searches for your own product. They're capturing those sales before you are, right? They also mark down product on a strange cadence, and we don't go on sale at all. We never ran a sale. We did one sample sale ever. We don't have an off-price outlet. We don't go on sale at the end of the season. We don't sell off-price retailers. So we're basically going up against retailers now where their incentive is different than ours. They have to make their sell-throughs, right? And we're trying to build a brand. So it's like those two ideas were conflicting with each other, or the two incentives. And so now we were at a point where we were looking at the business and we were like, wow, we have like this great D2C machine that's growing and we're making sales and people are excited by it. And, there's something there. And we also have this great wholesale machine where we're selling all these major retailers. And, we just were like worried about that visibility, and we were starting to see that the D2C side of the business, where it initially had this big spike when we weren't able to sell these retailers, right? When we weren't able to do the wholesale side of the business, the D2C was growing. And as soon as we started to feed the wholesale side of the business more, the D2C was shrinking.
Right, because they're capturing that demand. But just, it's interesting. You're caught between, on the one hand, the wholesale's a way for you to move product. On the other hand, it's degrading the brand and training the customer to wait for the sale that you don't want to give them. But if you don't do the wholesale, you make inventory mistakes inevitably because you have to try and predict your own demand, right? When you sell wholesale, it's like they want 100 units, you give them 100 units, that's it. Like you've sold 100 units. Retail, you buy 100 units, the customer's buying one a week, you got, the world's supply of that SKU. How do you say you don't go on sale. It's always one of these things that's so easy to say and hard to do. And that, what do you then do with your buying mistakes?
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most difficult parts of the business is how do you grow a business, right? With, taking inventory risk in order to see growth without taking too much inventory risk that can, tie up the entire cash flow of the business and find you in a terrible position. We're very thoughtful about how we don't have a planner. We don't have a buyer. We We don't have a merchandiser.
Yeah, that's gonna. By the way, that's gonna change.
Yeah, for sure.
Great planners. A great planner was one of the biggest. Gave us so much leverage at David C when we were scaling.
Yeah. So yeah, we're I think we're at the point now where we're realizing that's what we need. But we don't, we never had anybody in the business who was in charge of specifically merchandising and planning and buying. Early on, we took very little risk on inventory. And I think that in the end, that ended up working out for us in two ways. One was that we didn't have this big potential inventory problem. So we didn't have to go on sale for product, right? We would sell through a lot of the product. And two was that we, unknowingly to us, we were building a lot of hype because a product would
create a scarcity.
Yeah, exactly. We were creating scarcity, not on purpose, just out of fear. And so we were able to really, to build demand and hype. And then our supply didn't really meet our demand for a lot of our products until very recently. And I think even now we hold back a lot of our growth. Like we can be a much bigger business than we are if we started selling, many of the major retailers who reach out to us, monthly asking if we're willing to work with them. And the answer is oftentimes no.
But you're still in a certain amount of doors. Are you now pre-qualifying those doors and are you putting restrictions? I mean, you can't tell them you can't mark it down ever. But how are you, I mean, you're obviously restricting wholesale, but selling some. What's your strategy there?
Yeah, so good question. This brings me to what we were talking about with shifting the focus. So we had all these, retailers and we were realizing that the retailers were essentially hurting the brand, right? The brand we were working every day to try to build, right? And sell product at full price. We were finding that the retailers were actually hurting the brand. So we were concerned that that wasn't the direction to move in. So we looked at the business. By the way, at this point, wholesale is 75 to 80% of our business and D2C is around 20. And so we looked at the business and said, if we were completely to wipe out the wholesale side of the business, would we be able to recover from that? And so, from a cash flow perspective, the answer was no.
Right.
But from a long-term planning perspective, I knew it was the right decision. And so we would actually go back to almost all the major retailers we were selling and tell them that we're no longer opening our distribution to them. And so we would cut, 90% of the retailers we were selling. And
wow,
at the same time, we started working with a great showroom in Manhattan that represents brands. And I brought to them this plan of like, we're now selling X, Y, and Z retailers. That's not sustainable for the brand I want to build. We're going to build the next big denim brand in America. You can, benefit from that with us, but you have to be on board with what we're trying to do. We had this conversation with a few showrooms and most of them weren't on board for this. One of them was, and we built a great relationship together. But the idea was, I want to pull back distribution from all major retailers, aside for 2 to 3 strategic doors, right? One of them was going to be more of like a Gen Z model, right? So a younger customer. One of them was going to be a great online retailer that's not too luxury and sells volume, but still plays in the luxury, category. And the other one was going to be brick and mortar, right? And so, but higher line brick and mortar. So that was like Bergdorf Goodman, Revolve, and Shopbop. And so we strategically pulled back from all other retailers. And so the idea was like, how do we set up a system where if we're going to pull back from all these retailers, we don't lose the potential cash flow, that we would have working with them. And so we made a plan with the showroom that we were going to make up for those sales, selling boutiques and specialty stores. And so, yeah, that first season that we pulled back from working with those major retailers, we leaned into working with specialty and boutiques. We were selling maybe 3 at the time that we signed with them.
Did you wait until you had the boutiques lined up before you cut? Or no, you made the right decision for the brand right off the cuff with the confidence that you'd be able to get the boutiques?
Yeah, we took that risk. And I said, like, if this is a year where we see, the growth, don't see any growth, that's okay. Because this is a transitionary year and we ended up seeing growth that year because we made up for the business in boutiques and specialty stores.
Maurice, we could talk for hours. You have such great insights. I know you have a business to run here. Before we let you go, what's keeping you up at night now in the business?
Yeah, my three kids are keeping me up at night. 3 babies, but it's still the same, it's the cash flow side of things. Am I making the right decisions? Are we setting up the business in a way where we can continue to grow on this trajectory? How much of what I'm doing daily is the actual bottleneck in our growth, right? Focus versus like what's exciting. Like we're always talking here, like brainstorming, what's next for us? Is it hospitality? Is it another store in a different market? Is it, how can we continue to build on what we currently have? But then also checking ourselves on like, focusing in on what's working.
Do you have a framework for that and how you think about when to expand versus when to go narrow and deep? Or just a way that you think about that, right? Because depending on the time, sometimes you should be expanding. Sometimes you should be, narrowing in and going much deeper.
We hold back a lot of growth for the business, like a lot of growth strategically, and making sure that we have the foundational elements necessary to support that level of growth. I'm by no means excited by growth for the sake of growth, right? And top line revenue and, all the things that, a lot of founders today are obsessed with. I'm very, very focused on a few KPIs that I think most founders are not, which is like, profitability, right? Positive cash flow, sustainable growth. I'll put a max on what we can do in a year and be like, we're not going over this number. I won't buy enough inventory to go over this number because I don't want to break the ops associated with it. Right. And then, obviously like making sure that, we can build in a way that doesn't rely, it's not too founder, dependent. So building up managers in departments that we can rely on. So like those things are really important to me. So that all being said, I hold back a lot of the growth of the business until I feel like we're ready for it. And so in a way, it's like we're not oftentimes in a position where it's like we should probably not do that. We're more often saying no than we are yes.
It's amazing. It reminds me of a saying, nobody wants to make money slowly. But often that's how you end up doing the best.
I don't believe in shortcuts. I think we're trying to build a legacy brand, right? And so it's like, it's all about your time horizon. So if you have, 20 years to do something great, it's like, just keep doing that, right? You're going to be successful at it. Like you want to be the world's greatest DJ. Like if you DJ for long enough, like people are going to start to listen to your music, And so I feel that way about this business too. It's like a lot of times we challenge ourselves and say, what would it look like? We just did an exercise recently. What would it look like to pour lighter fluid on this, right? And what would that potentially, what would the results of that look like? And in the end, we were saying after doing that exercise for over an hour, I said like, I'm so much less excited by pouring lighter fluid on this. And I'm so much more excited about having a really strong kindling fire log at the bottom, right? Strong embers, right? And because the more you pour lighter fluid on a fire, the more it needs that, right?
That's right.
Doesn't ignite the wood more strongly. It just burns the alcohol, right?
Well, the fire doesn't necessarily get hotter. It just gets bigger. The flame gets bigger, but exactly, yeah.
Versus like really those building those embers,
Maurice, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all your insights. So many moments where you had to figure out what to do next, and boy, did you nail them.
Thank you. I appreciate it.